Last Sunday, April the 12th, 2026, I ran the Paris Marathon in 3 hours, 2 minutes and 40 seconds. And in this video, I'm going to talk a bit more about my experience, the course itself, the water station situation with no cups or bottles, and whether I recommend running it again. So if you want to know more, carry on watching. So I'm going to break this video into a couple of different bits. So the first bit, I'm just going to give you practical advice on the Paris Marathon as a whole. So if you're thinking about doing it next year, or you're just interested in the course profile, the water stations, then I'll go through all of that in the first part of this video. In the second part, I'm going to talk about my experience and my race day. So if you want, I'll timestamp it so you can skip to wherever you like. So let's start with the Expo. So we arrived at the Expo on the Saturday morning, which was the day before the race, at around about 10 a.m. And we had absolutely no problems getting there, getting in. There were no queues. I went straight to get my bib, straight to get my t-shirt, and had a wander around. Yeah, there was a few crowds, but it really wasn't too busy. I know that we'd had an email in the days preceding it saying that the Thursday and the Friday were going to be much quieter, which I can imagine. But if you get there early enough on the Saturday, there were no problems whatsoever. The Expo itself was huge. And if you've watched my actual race day video, you'll see I talk about it probably being potentially bigger than London. I do stand by that. Now, I haven't been to London for a few years, but it was ginormous. Every major brand, really, that you could think of, or sort of major gel provider, sock provider, sportswear provider were there. And you were funneled and it flowed round. So you essentially had to go past every single one to get out. And we were probably there about 45 minutes in total. And we didn't buy anything. I didn't think the merch was up to much in comparison to some of the majors that I've done. So we didn't want to spend unnecessary money there, but it's definitely worth a good, if you like your running merch, if you like your race merch, it's definitely worth spending a bit of time there. So on to race morning itself. So the waves are staggered, and staggered quite significantly. So I was in the red 3 hour wave. So I started just behind the elites and what they call the preferential, which I think was the sub 2 hour 50 runners. My official start time was 8:03. I think I crossed the line at 8:05. And then you had staggered waves. There was a 3:15, 3:30. I'm not sure if there was a 3:45, but then 4:15, 4:30. And they were staggered every 20 minutes or so, I believe. And within that, there was also kind of waves on either side of the starting grid that they'd let you off in phases, so trying to avoid congestion. So the reason I mention that now is what that meant for when I got there at just after 7 a.m, or I got to the Arc de Triomphe just after 7 a.m, because I'd walked from our hotel, was that you didn't have 60,000 people all arriving in the same place at once. So actually it made it really easy. There were loads of toilets. There was no queue for bag drop, and it was just felt efficient, calm, and not too stressful, which is exactly what you want the morning of a marathon. So one thing probably just to be aware of that I wasn't hugely clear on was that the bag drop is really close to the finish line. So you get to the Arc de Triomphe, and then you've probably actually got another 10-minute-ish walk away from the start line down to the finish line where you can drop your bags off, which meant I didn't drop my bag off till 7:15, and then it had another 10-15 minute walk back up to the Arc de Triomphe along the Champs-Elysees to the start. So make sure you give yourself a little bit of time, because the backdrop is a bit further away than I thought. Again, I should probably just reiterate, that was my experience being there between 7:30, 7 before the race. Obviously, as you get more people arriving for their waves, that may get busier. For me, again, no toilet queues really to speak of. I mean, there might be 1 or 2 people in front of me at worst. But at that time, for that early start, it was incredibly efficient. So once we got down to the Champs-Elysees, the start wave opened about 20 minutes before we were due to depart. So got in the, I wouldn't say it was a queue, more of a scrum to get into the start wave, even though, to be honest, I didn't really want to start at the very front anyway. But again, even in the start pen, there were toilets and urinals, which meant you didn't have to worry about getting into the pen too early. Like, you could just get in and relax, which I definitely think some of the other races need to take note. Although, having said that, the Champs-Elysees is very wide, whereas some of the other majors, the starts are a bit more narrow, so putting toilets in might not be as easy, but that was a nice added bonus for me. So let's talk about the course itself. Now, Paris is not hilly, but it's definitely not flat. I think the elevation is around double of that of somewhere like London. It's no Boston by any means, but it is not flat. So there are some sort of gradual lumps and bumps and elevations. So you go under the bridges along the Seine, and then you go down under the roads and back up again. So there's a few of those. And then there is also this pesky section from around about 37k, maybe 38k onwards. That is just some gradual inclines, which, do you know what? If you encountered those at 5k, 10k, or even halfway, they'd probably be all right. But because they come right at the end, they are a real slog. So, course-wise, it's not the most difficult, but it's by no means an easy course. Is it possible to run PBs? Yeah, of course it is. If you're fit enough, you do a little bit of hill training, and you're prepared for those inclines, and you manage your race strategy well enough. But it's not a Manchester or a Berlin or a Chicago in terms of the profile of the course. So how busy was it? It was pretty busy. So there were over 57,000 finishers in the end. And even though those were obviously staggered over probably a 3.5 hour period in terms of start times, because I was following the 3-hour pacer, it was very, very busy for probably the first 24, 25k. So it does get a little bit congested. As I said, I don't know what it was like in the sort of 3.5, 4 hour wave groups. But yeah, even in that 3-hour pace group, it was pretty congested. Now, in some ways, that's quite good, because as long as you are comfortable just sitting in with a pack, and you're sort of maintaining pace, then obviously you're not exposed to the wind. You don't really have to think about the pace too much. You can just sort of follow the crowd. But it also meant it was quite difficult getting over to aid stations. So yeah, if you want a quiet marathon, this one's not the one. So the route itself, so you start about halfway down or along the Champs-Elysees from the Arc de Triomphe, run down into Place de la Concorde, and then you sort of weave your way out. I think it's towards sort of eastern Paris. So you go past the Opera House, and then you get down to Bois de Vincennes, which I think is the largest public park in Paris. And you've got the turning point at the Bastille. You come back through sort of central Paris, along the Seine. So then you go past Notre Dame, the Musée d'Orsay, and Eiffel Tower before you get to Bois de Boulogne, which is another park. So you'll go near Parc des Princes and Roland Garros for those of you who like your tennis and your rugby. And then you come back in sort of towards near Trocadero, up Victor Hugo Avenue, and then you finish on Avenue Foch or Foch. I'm not sure how you pronounce that. So that is the route. As I said, it is not
flat, but I would not consider it a hilly course. The main kind of elevation bits are when you come out of the road tunnels. So yeah, there's a few in London as well, where you go down and you come up there, the main ones. And then you've got the drag in Bois de Boulogne as well, which is, quite off-putting after 37k. There are some tunnels on the course, and whilst I don't have any kind of problems or claustrophobia or anything like that, I know that they are quite disconcerting for some people because they're quite long stretches and you can't see the end of the tunnels. They also have quite loud music that a DJ set, again, which I found pretty cool. And it sort of distracted me from the pain at that point. But just so you're aware, there are a couple, and there is one in particular that is a long drag, and you can't see the end. So if you've got any kind of like I said, claustrophobia or anxiety about sort of confined spaces, just be aware of that.
So let's talk about the water stations. So for those of you that don't know, the Paris Marathon was the first marathon, I think in the modern era anyway, where there was no disposable cups or bottles on course at all. So there was no water stations where you could just grab a cup from a volunteer and carry on your way. It was all done with like nozzles and hoses, and you had to be filled up with a receptacle of your choice as you went. So you could either risk and try and get them to fill it as you were running, or you had to stop. So at the Expo, we were given two things. One of them is this kind of refillable sort of, I don't know what material this is, cup. So it's 200 ml, and the theory is you go to the water station, you fill it up, you drink, and you keep it on you. There's a loop there that you can sort of keep it to your belt buckle or whatever. And then the second thing you got was this hydration vest. So again, so you can put bottles, gels, whatever you want in there. It's pretty compact. It's quite small as hydration vests go. But if you like wearing a pack, fine. I mean, this is great. Personally, I don't like wearing that sort of thing when I'm running. So I didn't use this on the day. Beforehand, there was lots of people talking about the challenges around stopping, particularly if you're going for a time, if you have to stop to fill up. What was my experience? Mixed, to be honest. So I found, because I was following the 3-hour pacer group, I was in a very, very congested pack of people, all running reasonably quickly, sort of between 4:10 and 4:15 per kilometre. And it was pretty congested, probably until about 24, 25k, when things started to thin out a little bit. Trying to get over to the water stations and to stop to get these things filled up in those first 24, 25k would have been really difficult. Not impossible, but difficult. Now, I had 2 soft flasks on me anyway. So I had one 350ml soft flask with electrolytes on it, and one 350ml soft flask with a carb solution, a Morton 320 mix carb solution in there. So I had 700ml of liquid on me anyway. So I knew I probably wouldn't need to stop until later in the race to fill up. I first stopped at around about 25k. So like I said, that's when things had quietened down a little bit, and I was still in the sub 3 group, but it wasn't as congested. I pulled over, used my hand signals to get over to the side of the road, and I stopped, and it probably cost me between 8 and 10 seconds. Now the challenges were, I had to get my soft flask open as I was running, because I didn't have that cup on me, and it was just extra faff that I didn't need. And then the second thing was the nozzles and the pressure of those nozzles, trying not to get the water on your feet and trying to actually get it to stay in the soft flask were a bit of a challenge. I probably got about 2/3 of my soft flask full in an 8 to 10 second stop. I then stopped again at around about 33k, maybe 32k, I can't remember exactly, at the electrolyte stop, which was, again, same principle. So people with nozzles and they fill it up. This one took a little bit longer because the the volunteer that did it really tried to make sure that her nozzle was on the top of my soft flask. And I don't know, that was because obviously it's a sticky solution. She didn't want it to get on my feet or whatever, but she took 3 or 4 seconds just lining it up before starting. So that stop probably cost me 10 to 12 seconds, maybe. Also stopping that later in the race, I could feel my momentum it was a bit trickier to get going again at that point. But look, 10 seconds, 10 to 12 seconds in the grand scheme of things wasn't the end of the world. But I do think they need to look at the pressure. And I do need to think they think about the time it takes them to actually refill those cups up. I probably should have stopped again at around about 37k, because I was going through the water quite quickly then. And also, again, on that electrolyte stop, I probably only got half a soft flask. So I probably only got around about 150 to 175 mil in there. But I didn't stop again because I did not want to seize up. I knew that I was starting to hurt. And at 37-ish K, when it was really starting to get tough, I thought, look, I knew I was close to 3 if I kind of maintained that pace. And I knew that because my legs were starting to hurt, if I stopped, I was going to really struggle to get going again. Now, and this was the argument beforehand, that on a really hot day, is it dangerous? Are more people going to make the decision like I did to forego a stop, to chase a time, or to make sure that they carry on momentum? Maybe. Now, we were fortunate in Paris in that the conditions weren't bad. Actually, like I think I've said before, it was 8 to 10 degrees, no real wind, bit of cloud cover. Like, it was fine. It wasn't a super hot day where I needed lots of fluids. But on that hot day, that could have been a risk. The other thing to say is, on a very cold or a very wet day, if your hands are cold, unscrewing my soft flask just before a station to get it open and then tighten it again could pose problems. The argument would say, well, why didn't you use the cup? Well, I just didn't want to. I saw people and it was just bouncing out as they were running along. There were people they were trying not to stop. They had the volunteers hosing along, and it was just bouncing out because of the pressure. So there's definitely stuff to work on. I'm not against it, but I do think there definitely needs to be some tweaks moving forwards. But I wouldn't let it put you off. It's one of those things, you just, like I said, if you take some water to start with, you're probably going to be okay for certainly the first part of the race. And then hopefully you won't need to stop lots of times towards the back end of the race. But it's just something to be mindful of. So for the final bits of the practical advice about Paris Marathon, I'll come on to the finish line and kind of the post-race bits. So not much to talk about the finish line. Once you get through there, obviously you walk through, you'll get your medal. They have things like bananas, they've got water, they have bars, that sort of thing. Sort of usual post-marathon paraphernalia. Although there was a really cool cheer crowd. Once you get your medal, you walk down this and there were 3 routes, and I went down the left route because no one was there. And I basically just felt like a rock star. It was amazing. I think if you see on the actual race day video, you'll see it. And then go pick up your bag. Again, really, really easy. Maybe because obviously I was one of the earlier finishers. I think I finished 2,700-ish out of 57,000. So I'd say that's reasonably early. And then there's a couple of places you can kind of exit the actual baggage area into the crowds. Now, it was crazy busy as soon as you exit. There were hundreds of people gathered around the exit waiting for their loved ones to come out. So once I navigated out of that, it was fine, but all really efficient, really smooth. The one thing I think I've forgotten to mention at the beginning was Paris is not a ballot, or it certainly wasn't when I entered. Whether or not it might be in the future, I don't know. But I just entered. Now, I entered at the end of April last year, so I think I entered it just after the London Marathon had been run. So if you are thinking about doing it, have a look at, I don't know when registration's open, but it isn't a ballot. You got a guaranteed place. So if you want a big city marathon, good course, well supported. Obviously, if you're in the UK, Paris isn't that far. We got the Eurostar, but obviously you can fly as well. I would definitely recommend it. I really, really enjoyed it as a course, as a big city marathon, and therefore I would go back. However, my race day did not go to plan.
So what went wrong? I guess wrong is relative. In 2018, at the London Marathon, I ran 4 hours and 38 minutes. At the 2023 London Marathon, I ran 3 hours and 44 minutes. So, to have run 3 hours, 2 minutes and 40 seconds, and say that went wrong, well, I mean, what can I do? But yeah, it wasn't my target goal, but it does demonstrate that I've come a long way in the last 10 years, and certainly in the last 3. So for those of you that have watched the race vlog, my A goal was to run a PB, my B goal was to run sub 3, and my seagull was to finish. And I ended up with the seagull. But why did I miss my A and B goals? The fact is, I'm not sure there's one thing that I could actually pinpoint to say where my race went wrong or why I didn't hit those goals. But I think there's a few things that perhaps didn't quite go my way in the last couple of weeks, and some of it was just out of my control. So let's start with the injury. So 2 weeks before Paris, I got some pain in the arch of my foot, which was sort of transferring up to my Achilles. The day after, on the Monday, my Achilles was really, really sore, and it remains sore. I mean, it remains sore now, but really sore for at least a week. So there was no running on it. I did a bit of cross training, but it was a bit half-assed, to be honest. So I had 2 weeks really of no kind of heart rate exertion and very, very minimal exercise. Whilst I know I was tapering, I know I would have detrained more than I would have liked in those 2 weeks. Second thing, sleep. I actually slept really badly in the week leading up to Paris. I don't know if that was nerves, anxiety, stress, I'm not sure. But yeah, I just didn't sleep well. I obviously wear this Whoop band and it tells me kind of what my sleep score is, what my recovery score. And that week leading up to Paris, it was red or yellow, as in not good. Pretty much the entire week leading up to it. So thirdly, and this might be a bit of a controversial one actually, but I went into it a bit heavy. So I like to be around about 64 kilos when I enter onto race day. And I came into this one at about 66. Now, it's not the end of the world. I've been doing more gym stuff. They say muscle weighs more than fat, but I didn't feel at my leanest. Now, some people, that's absolutely fine. But for me, I do like to feel like I'm at race weight. And because I'd been basically eating like I was marathon training for those last 2 weeks, but not exercising like I've been marathon training, I ended up putting a little bit back on. So I went in, as I said, just a bit heavier than I would have liked. And then lastly, I just never clicked. It just didn't click on race day. I never really got going. The paces to run a sub 3 should have felt comfortable for at least the first 10k, if not half marathon, given that I ran a sub 121 half marathon just sort of 3 or 4 weeks beforehand. There's no way it should have felt that tough, but it did from the start. And when your heart rate spikes and it's difficult to get it back down again, your mind starts wandering, the negative thoughts start coming in. It's very, very difficult to get out of that mindset. And unfortunately, I just couldn't, like I said, I never really got going. Okay, so there's some of the things that I think didn't go so well, went wrong. But what am I going to do about them next time? And yes, despite what I said in the video, there will be a next time. So my fueling and my nutrition went well. I had a nutrition alert on my watch every 25 minutes. And I literally just, as soon as it went off, I took a gel. And I alternated calf, non-calf. I had my electrolytes, I had my carb solution, I had a proper breakfast, so almost 3 hours before. Like, from that perspective, strategically, it couldn't have gone any better. Like, I wouldn't have wanted to change anything from that perspective. So number one, don't overtrain. And I think that is what caused me to injure my Achilles in this block. So I had this great run, or so it felt, of 12, maybe 14 days straight of running just before we went to Tenerife, whilst we were in Tenerife, and then when I got back. And that was, you know, I was averaging 10 miles a day, there or thereabouts. I did 67-mile week, which was way bigger than any of my other weeks. And unfortunately, I just think I put too much strain on my body, which caused me to get injured. Now, I know, like, I'm a coach. I know that's not sensible. But sometimes when you're in the groove, you're feeling good, and all you want to do is run. That takes over from knowing best. So I need to make sure next time that I'm more sensible. I don't run every day. I do more cross training, and that I give myself optimum time to rest and recover. Second thing, more leg strength training. So I have incorporated a lot more gym work, or I did incorporate more gym work into that block, but a lot of it was upper body stuff, actually focusing on quads, glutes, calves, hamstrings wasn't a primary focus. And I could really feel it, particularly in my quads. For those last 4 or 5k, they were really burning. And I think I've just got to get them stronger so that I can finish those last 5k of a marathon feeling in good condition. And thirdly, mental resilience. I've talked about this a few times on the channel over the last sort of 6 to 8 weeks, and I need to work on that because I let the negative thoughts in far too easily, and then I find it really difficult to get rid of them. I know techniques to get away with them, however, like when I'm actually in race mode, I just can't seem to do it. So I need to practice and I need to get better at being positive and my mental resilience during a race. And then lastly, hills. So I know hills are a cheat code. I did loads of them for Manchester. I did them for Chicago, even though it's flat. But I didn't really do any for Paris. And Paris is probably, other than Boston, the most undulating marathon I've done. So I don't know why I didn't do them, but I definitely need to get back into the routine. Not just because it prepares you for hills, but just because it's good for form, it's good for leg strength. There's loads of benefits to hill running, and I just didn't do enough of it. So folks, that is the end of another video and another race series actually, because I'm not going to bang on about Paris much more now. This video block has been long enough. My next video is actually going to be a slightly different one. So I am marshalling at the London Marathon this Sunday. So I am going to be videoing from a marshal and a spectator's perspective. Our running club marshal the first mile from the Blue Start, which is the elite start. So hopefully I'll see, well, all the elites, loads of the sub-elite YouTube runners, and then all the masses, club runners, charity runners, fancy dress runners, and I genuinely can't wait. So next week's video will be a little bit different, but thank you again for everybody that has watched this series. It didn't quite end with the result that I would have wanted, but as I said at the beginning, 3:02:40, you know, I'd have taken that, you know, a couple of years ago in a heartbeat, and I will get back to sub 3. I will.